All right, we're back live with Harrowings in the Bunker. I have been having a really nice New Year's Day. Hope all of y'all have had a nice day too. I'm going to turn off Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. So far, was playing in the background. They were on Teach Your Children. That's a really nice slide guitar part played by Jerry Garcia that earned him the Nash Fender Stratocaster that became Alligator. The name of the guitar. Anyway, what do I want to talk to you all about tonight? We've got a few just joined. Dawn Kitten K and Mindy Hankin. Hey, how you doing? I've seen you coming by quite often. And Trauma Matrix, Emma Lyons joined. You know, trauma is one of the things I think that we all suffer from because when we're born, you know, our heads are huge. And it's very traumatic getting out and, you know, can actually result in having to have a cesarean or something because the birth canal is so narrow. It's just getting this big brain out there. And we're all born a little premature. We're pretty helpless as infants. We don't get up and run around like horses. We are dependent on our parents for care or someone. You know, someone's got to take care of us because we're incapable of doing it ourselves. And eventually, you know, we can become incapacitated in life as well and need help. Asking for help is a big part of what's going on for 2026 because I'm down to, you know, my last farthings to keep this thing going. And I do have some support from some paid subscribers. They are my board of directors for the Harold B. Gill Foundation, LLC, which is a going concern, but its source of sustenance is Harrowings, the Substack subscribers. I don't really have any grants going right now. I probably could get some if I get some body of work going, but I've been really distractible and I've got a lot of creative ideas going. You know, I like to do podcasts with people. I like to come on live and talk to you all from the bunker or talk to you all with my camera pointed outwards away from me because it's not about me. It's about the passing show and what humanity is doing here and now. And so I think about that. I can only see like a limited part of the spectrum, a limited point of view, and everything is colored through my experience, right? And I could be wrong. This is one of the things that I do with my philosophical bent here. I was recently number 69 rising in philosophy category on Substack. I have dropped since then, apparently back off the radar. But I just come up there on occasion. I don't know why. I don't know how that works entirely. I don't really care because it's not about popularity. It's not about being the biggest. It's about whether or not I can get a message through that somebody can pick up and carry on and transmit further, right? Amplification. So, you know, you tell two of your friends to come over to Harrowings, and that's huge because you know, it's a ripple effect. 2, 4, 8, 16, and it grows and like that. We've already got 6 people on here. Tell me, how are you? Where are you? That would be interesting. Write a message, you know, in the chat here. And then we could get to know each other better that way. Or not. Or you could just listen to me prattle on all evening. You know, my role model for doing this is Patti Smith. She gets on there and she did today, you know, so if you go out to at Patti Smith, nothing after it, and find her, you'll see that she has gone live and started talking to people who are her subscribers and letting them in on the fact she's going to be doing a Smith's, what does she call it? It would be like a symposium, but it's a Smithposium. All right. And which we can pose questions to her and she can see what she can do with them, particularly about Bread of Angels, which is her new memoir. She's done a number of works like this. M-Train, Wool Gathering was another smaller one, Devotion. There was another one called Year of the Monkey. That's quite good. I like that a lot. It made me feel very unread though. And she's very well read. And so what? You know, why are we comparing? Anyway, we got North Fork, Long Island from Dawn Kitten K. Thank you. You know, my grandmother came from Bay Shore, Long Island. She came out of there to Orange, Virginia, where she intersected with my grandfather, who invited her on a date. He showed up at 4 o'clock, and she was expecting like 8 o'clock. But this is Virginia, right? Rural Virginia. And one thing led to another, and here I am. Harold B. Gill Sr. gets a doff of the cap for making me a baron of the Magna Carta by marrying Catherine Elizabeth Jane of Bayshore, Long Island. She went up there and visited her parents when she was pregnant with my father, and there's a letter I've got that he typed to her while she was up there with my Aunt Wilma, who's still around, and my Aunt Jane, who died fairly young in her 50s. Jane had polio, and apparently she got some sort of like peritonitis or something happened to her that killed her. Much younger than anybody expected. Sudden things can happen to you in the world. You know, a little viral infection can set you back. A little worried about my wife because she's a little settled down. You were born in Bayshore, Dawn Kitten K. I wonder if you might know the Jane family, Jayne. They settled in that area in the 17th century and were there at least as long as my great-grandfather, Charles Edwin Jane, I think his name, or Charles Edward Jane. I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up. And Emma Pearsall Watts was my great-grandmother. And they lived in a little house down there. I've got a, envelope that my grandfather mailed this summer 1932 letter to my grandmother when she was carrying my father. I don't even know if she knew yet. She probably did. Let's see, it was June or July, I guess, that letter. And that's actually on Harrowings. I transcribed it to one of the posts I put up within the last year. I'm going through my father's stuff. I've got all these files. You can see behind me all these boxes and things that are mostly my stuff, but there's also things that belong to my father in a closet over here. Arranged around here, there's an oil painting of him that was done by Wayne Barrett, who was the editor of the Colonial Williamsburg Journal. This is an edition of the Colonial Williamsburg Journal that my father did an article in here on divorce in colonial America and how that worked out when people needed to go their separate ways. Oh, yeah, there is. Page 30. Till death or legislature do us part is the name of it. You know what might be fun for the evening? I might read it to you. Lee Penman is joined. Hey, Lee, good to see you. Think about you often. And I'm glad to see that people are boosting your articles about Rico. And, life is a continual series of losses, as I've come to find. And grief is just one of those constant companions. But it's love, that's lost its object. And feels like hell when we're in it. Let's take a look and see how this rolls. I haven't actually transcribed this one. It's not available out on the net. So y'all are getting, access to something that's a little hard to come by. That's till death or the legislature do us part. And they're nice little pictures of couples having conversations. Eavesdroppers, too, of course. Everybody's a gossip. It's a small town. Williamsburg, Virginia was when the colonial period was going on and we were running up to the revolution. We're coming up this year, 250-year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Well, that's not too long an article. We'll go ahead and give it a read. So, this is Till Death or the Legislature Do Us Part, Separate Maintenance and Scandal in 18th Century Virginia by Harold B. Gill, Jr. Starts out with a quotation from John Milton, The Doctrine and Discipline of Divorce from 1643. And John Milton then wrote, "Not that license and levity and unconsented breach of faith should herein be countenanced, but that some conscionable and tender pity might be had of those of you have unwarily in a thing they never practiced before made themselves the bondmen of a luckless and helpless matrimony." So that's from John Milton from 1643. The language can be a little bit opaque, I must admit. I'm not so sure that my father's own writing won't be a little opaque, but we'll go for it and see how it turns out. Like I said, I need to transcribe this one. It's not available on the net, as far as I know. The popular press reports half the marriages in the United States now end in divorce. How times change. In much of early America, it was rare for even the most wretched union to be legally put asunder before death did a couple part. There was in colonial Virginia or any colony where the Church of England was established no court with authority to end a marriage. The irreconcilable Williamsburg husband John Custis's testimony against his wife was given not at the bar, but on his tombstone. He was aged 71 years and yet lived but 7 years, which was the space of time he kept a bachelor's house on the eastern shore of Virginia. Did you get that? I'll read it again. The tombstone said he was aged 71 years, but yet lived but 7 years, which was the space of time he kept a bachelor's house on the eastern shore of Virginia. To escape matrimonial misery while yet above ground, a Virginian only had the option of a lawsuit for separate maintenance. That fell short of being quit of a spouse forever, and neither husband nor wife could remarry while the other lived. And the picture I was showing you earlier of the couple having an argument has a caption as feuding James and Kitty Blair in the front, and Kitty's mother, Margaret Eustace, is the interpreter. Interpreters Jason Whitehead, Brooke Barrows, and Francis Burroughs chill the garden air. So that was an illustration of them chilling the garden air, her mother, and you see that young man who was representing James Blair. The mother is Margaret Eustace. The interpreters' names were Jason Whitehead, Brooke Barrows, and Francis Burroughs. I seem to remember Brooke Barrows. Anyhow, we'll go on with this article a little bit. Here's a nice little illustration of happiness turns upside down to sorrow in the 18th century marriage cartoon. This is like early Gestalt, right? So, whoop, likes to zoom away from me. And then you turn it this way, they're not so happy. Yeah, early Gestalt. Okay, so the actual inscription is a little hard to read. It says courtship and marriage, and then it says marriage. Okay, the upright part's courtship and marriage, and then the flip side is, this is courtship, is the smiley faces, and marriage is the unhappy faces. Okay, got that. The colonists took their jurisprudence from England, where absolute divorce required an act of Parliament. A spouse might petition for a private bill, depending on the grounds, for what we would call an annulment, or sometimes a legal separation. Parliament granted absolute divorce only for adultery proved in a criminal court, as well as in an ecclesiastical court, a church tribunal in America unknown. Legislative divorce was expensive, and between 1670 and 1799, Parliament granted but 131, an average about one a year. In Virginia, the likely equivalent would be a General Assembly Act, but no such bill was sought until 1787 or passed until 1802. If early Virginia law would not absolutely end a marriage, many a spouse absolutely regretted having said, "I do." In Williamsburg, the signal example of misbegotten nuptials was the case of Blair versus Blair. Counsel for one Blair or the other were Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, John Randolph, Edmund Pendleton, and James Mercer. Some of those names should be very famous or well known to you all. Dr. James Blair and Catherine Eustace married May 21st, 1771 in Norfolk. He looked to be a good catch. Born into a prominent family in 1741, his father was John Blair, sometimes acting governor and president of the Governor's Council. The groom studied medicine in Edinburgh, Scotland, and practiced in Williamsburg. His brother, John Blair Jr., was the colony's deputy auditor and council clerk. The bride, called Kitty, was a daughter of Dr. John and Margaret Eustace, who had moved from England to North Carolina, where the physician died in 1769. His family, which included son John, moved to New York, where kinsman Lord Dunmore was governor. His lordship would become Virginia's chief in 1770. John Eustace moved with Dunmore to Williamsburg to enroll at the College of William and Mary at Dunmore's expense. Kitty Eustace and her mother visited Norfolk in 1769 and 1770 and were welcomed into society. Merchant James Parker called the girl Chip and thought her clever but rather forward. His wife wrote, Miss Eustace and her pretty daughter were really two very agreeable ladies. The bride was probably 10 or more years younger than her 30-year-old husband. Parker said in May 1771, I think the doctor will marry more than one, because the pair must go together. He said mother-in-law Margaret Eustace was a clever managing sort of lady who has played her cards exceeding well. The marriage quickly foundered for lack of consummation. Whom to fault was disputed. The bride left her Williamsburg home for a house near where Mother Eustace accepted boarders. Among them was a college student, St. George Tucker, whom the Eustaces likely met in Norfolk, through their mutual friend, Dr. Archibald Campbell. The bride sued to enforce what seems to have been a prenuptial agreement that she was entitled to her half of Dr. Blair's estate for separate maintenance. The case was submitted to arbitrators, apparently to foster a reconciliation. Dr. Campbell mediated. Parker wrote in May 1772, after a Williamsburg visit, a most damnable fuss has been at Williamsburg with Dr. Blair and his rib. Nothing was talked of but separation. Matters were painted blacker than they really were, and she is acquitted of everything but not allowing him to have a fair chance ever since they have been married. By the prudent counsel of Dr. Campbell, they are seemingly reconciled, and she was to let him make a push the night we left. That's interesting language. Reconciliation failed, however. In June, Parker wrote, It seems she jumped out of bed and would not do anything. There never was such a piece of work, nor perhaps so public a private embarrassment. Kitty Blair wrote that summer, as we flip it over. I have received indignities I would not, if I might, inflict from cruel and hard-hearted strangers, but notwithstanding, I have as many sweetly shining testimonies of worthy hearts bleeding for my distress as he can boast. Still a little opaque in the old language for me. I'll have to go over that a few times. She was justifying herself to her sister-in-law, Anne Blair, in a missive dated July 18th, with salutations to my dearest Nanny, the sister of my heart. She said that under the sanction you have given to Mama of communicating her private thoughts to you, I am sure you will not think of me an intruder. She described her mother as the best and tenderest of parents, drooping under the afflictions she has felt for me. She said she wanted to share sentiments which I have hitherto declined. Kitty Blair spoke of the little pains your brother took to be ascertained of my affection before marriage. She said she loved and valued her in-laws and had no particular objection to your brother, nor no partiality in favor of any other person on my mind. And she wrote, and this is a quote, I had no reason to doubt that gratitude and esteem for the affection he had for me would enable me to discharge the most rigid duties of a good wife. When that accursed letter, which fell in my hands the evening after, blasted every sanguine wish of your friend. And forgive me when I tell you there was too many circumstances in your these brothers' manner of conduct that seemed a confirming a confirmation of the charge against him, to wit, chased from my heart that esteem I should otherwise have felt for him. You yourself told me I ought to get over every prejudice before I again connected my fate finally with his. My mother, too, repeatedly told me, without this, my state would be no more than a legal prostitution. Well, how about that? Here, the three-cornered hate, money, recrimination, and a lack of conjugal intimacy fired the scandal with Mrs. Eustace fanning the flames. Below, Jefferson made notes for a bill of divorce after Dr. Blair asked for help. So you've got the picture of the actors playing these people. Blair, Kitty, Eustace, the mother of Kitty. And then there's actually Jefferson's notes as well. Okay. Next page, and we're not done yet. We've got a ways to go. The accursed letter was an anonymous note to Mother Eustace, apparently written the night after the failed reconciliation. It said, "I have believed and experience will confirm it that Dr. Blair is incompetent." Kitty Blair had hoped for a reunion, telling her mother, "If it does not take place, it is not my fault." Mother Eustace carried comment and letter to Dr. Campbell. Learning of the letter, the estranged husband asked his mother-in-law what to others she had divulged. She said, "I never made a confidant but of one lady and Dr. Campbell, who you yourself first informed long before I was from you acquainted with your sentiments. Mr. Tucker, who had his first intelligence from the world I have often talked to on the odious subject. After them both let Dr. Campbell, too, produce my letters. They will speak for me. This for my own satisfaction, not yours." Dr. Blair wrote to young Tucker, "Now, sir, I never feel myself more happy than in executing the commands of a lady. I presume that I am to ask you, among others, what passed in the frequent conversations you have had with Mrs. Eustace relative to the odious subject, and that you may be at no loss to understand what that is. I will tell you that the odious subject here referred to is neither more nor less than a question concerning my virility. I hope, sir, you will oblige the lady and give the necessary information." Tucker complied, and the lawsuit resumed. Parker reported in November, "Matters are now come to an open rupture at Williamsburg. The old lady persists her daughter is still a maid, and that the doctor never has had, and indeed cannot do as a man should do. For my own part, I was once of the side that blamed Kitty. I have now altered my opinion." So poor Blair, I mean, it's basically being emasculated in the public eye. To Dr. Blair came gossip of a liaison between his wife and Dunmore, and he confronted the governor about them. His lordship and the bride's mother denied impropriety, to which denials the doctor was persuaded to accede. Kitty Blair lost her case, but appealed to the General Court, the colony's highest bench. Her husband consulted lawyer Thomas Jefferson, a member of the House of Burgesses. Jefferson researched a private bill of divorce. He compiled arguments from law, the Bible, and ancient usage to show in what situations divorce was appropriate. His notes include evidence in support of it, as well as arguments against it, but he introduced no bill. The research, however, may have been of use 5 years later when revising Virginia's laws during the Revolution. Jefferson drafted a divorce statute. It would have annulled marriages under the law used by England's ecclesiastical courts, but the measure was tabled. So he didn't get quite that far. While appeal of the Blairs' separate maintenance suit pended, husband Blair died December 26, 1772. Apparently, I would think of embarrassment. On a visit to Albemarle County, Dr. Blair has very opportunely taken his departure for the other world, by which 'tis to be hoped Kitty's case will be helped, Parker wrote. She'll get his dowry at all events. A widow whose husband died intestate was entitled to a dowry of a third of his estate, and likewise, if there was a will she disavowed. Dr. Blair's will made no provision for his wife. The executor, Brother John Blair Jr., refused dowry. Madame Eustace, with her maiden widow daughter, as Parker put it, returned to court. I do not see upon what principles they withhold it from her. I think 'twould be best to give them something and let them decamp. Executor Blair's counsel argued that because there was no consummation, the marriage should be annulled, in which case Kitty Blair was not a widow and entitled to nothing. The court ruled for the estate, but an appeal was taken to the general court, the judges of which were Dunmore and his counsel. The records are destroyed, but for Jefferson's account and two tangential affidavits, we would know little of what transpired. Attorney General Randolph and Henry represented the widow. Henry recalled years later that the appeal was filed by her mother as guardian or next friend. Executor Blair hired Pendleton and Mercer. Jefferson engaged for advice, took no part in the arguments, but he wrote, and this is a quote from Thomas Jefferson, "The evidence was voluminous and indecent. That of the defendant tended to prove on the complainant original hatred, ill temper, disobedience, refusal of conjugal rights, departure not without some kind of adultery, that of the complainant to fix on Dr. Blair, impotence, and hidden causes of disgust, and it was difficult to say on which side the evidence preponderated. The suspicion of adultery were with Lord Dunmore, who, presiding at the court at the hearing of the cause, might be the reason why those suspicions were not urged. Randolph argued first, presenting Kitty Blair's case for 4 hours, emphasizing a 1705 Virginia law which provided, as Jefferson wrote, that the wife of any person dying intestate shall be endowed of 1/3 part of all her husband's lands, tenements, and other real estate, which was to say a dowry. An act of 1727 said a widow who renounced her husband's will was entitled to dowry, but because Dr. Blair's will left her nothing, Randolph argued Kitty Blair had nothing to renounce. In the civil sense, he said, marriage is as binding as a contract, and in the religious sense, when the priest has pronounced to man and wife, the bond is indissoluble. Two things, therefore, Randolph said, are only requisite to constitute a marriage. 1, consent, and 2, solemnization by the church. Randolph said the law almost always assumed consummation. Jefferson and Henry avoided, as was his custom, entering the list of the law. He argued that if between the hours of solemnization and retirement to the nuptial bed Dr. Blair had died, his widow would have been endowed. He tried to show that his client had been toujours prête. I don't know what toujours prête it means, but it's French probably. But that there was a want of readiness in the doctor. For the defense, Pendleton made heavy use of religion. He said that the purposes of marriage, according to the church ritual, are 1, for the procreation of children, and 2, for a remedy against sin and to avoid fornication, and 3, for the mutual society, help, and comfort of the parties. He said a marriage was void from fraud in the wife or error in the husband, and cited authorities to show the hypocrisy of Mrs. Blair and deceit on Dr. Blair, and to prove that there are cases in which the marriage is not lawful. He relied also on poet John Milton's Doctrine and Discipline of Divorce and Tetrachordon to undercut Randolph's arguments and bolster his own. And Pendleton and said Widow Blair was not entitled to dower, if only because she did not renounce the will, this being expressly required by the Act of Assembly. Now, the court ruled the same day, November 3rd, 1773, in favor of Kitty Blair. In December, she advertised in the Virginia Gazette auctions of her share of Dr. Blair's cattle, hogs, tools, and the like, and offered to rent her dower in lands and slaves at 2 plantations. She agreed to the assignment of one of her husband's tenements in Williamsburg in lieu of dower rights and his other city homes, and lived there with her mother in what Henry termed genteel appearance and style. Genteel appearance and style. There we go. In 1777, the year Jefferson drafted his divorce statute, Kitty Blair married Major Seth John Cuthbert of Chatham County, Georgia. The Reverend John Bracken performed the ceremony at Bruton Parish Church, and now Governor Henry was on hand. Cuthbert, under the law, took possession of his wife's dowry, to which they had right during her life. He paid £640 for absolute rights and 18 slaves on that. They could take them to Georgia, where trouble may have followed. Mother Eustace certainly did. Catherine Eustace Blair, Cuthbert's second marriage, seems to have failed too. By 1785, Cuthbert had married Martha Clay, who bore him 2 sons. There is no record of divorce. Kitty Cuthbert seems to have lived until about 1788, the year the Major died, when Mother Eustace took over her estate. In 1787, John Blair Jr. sued Seth Cuthbert for more than £339 due for remaining dowry rights. The year before that, Mother Eustace sued him to recover from the dowry money she spent supporting her daughter their 4 years in Williamsburg. That was the year Virginia's General Assembly received its first petition for a private bill of divorce outright, and it was denied. Virginia's legislature first flirted with a private bill of divorce in 1789 when petitioner Anne Dentegow prayed for relief, alleging that her husband treated her in a cruel and inhuman manner and had abandoned her to live with another woman in adultery. The assembly allowed her to obtain a general court writ against her husband, which shall express the nature of the case and shall be published for 8 weeks successfully in some one of the public papers, whereupon the plaintiff may file for her declaration in the said cause, and the defendant may appear and plead to issue, in which case, or if he does not appear, within 2 months after such publication, it shall be set for trial. Similar acts passed in 1790 and 1791 in the North. The law was more accommodating. Historian Thomas C. Buckley says that by 1790, northern states that had not already were adopting laws that empowered the courts to grant divorce and specified acceptable grounds. But in Virginia and the rest of the South, Buckley writes, in the great catastrophe of my life, divorce in the Old Dominion, the civil code did not mention divorce. No courts possessed jurisdiction to dissolve marriages. The solution lay in legislative action, but at the time and for decades to come, the General Assembly refused to establish systematic judicial procedures or to specify grounds for divorce. Instead, the legislators themselves handled individual divorce petitions, and they rejected most of them. Not until 1851 did the Third State Convention finally end legislative divorce. In 1827, Virginia's legislature granted limited jurisdiction to the courts, but still left its doors open to divorce petitioners. Among the reasons for hesitation, Buckley says, was the divorce threatened the stability of a hierarchical slaveholding society bottomed on the family. On 1800s, legislature said the community's welfare demanded that divorce should be discouraged as much as possible. Buckley writes, in our no-fault era, The very idea of asking legislators to provide a divorce by private bill boggles the mind. But well into the 19th century, Virginia law afforded no other option for desperately unhappy women and men trapped in loveless relationships. And that's from consulting editor Hal Gill, who says this story relies heavily on articles by Frank L. Dewey, Thomas Jefferson, and a Williamsburg Scandal, The Case of Blair versus Blair, Virginia Magazine of History and Biography, Volume 89, pages 44 to 63, and Thomas Jefferson's Notes on Divorce, William and Mary Quarterly, Third Series, Volume 39, pages 212 to 223. That's it. If anybody's joined us and followed along with the case of Till Death or the legislature do us part, you've really hung in through a pretty dense little article, but it's kind of exciting too. You get Jefferson, you get Henry, you get all these guys tied up in this situation between Kitty Blair and her husband, who apparently was impotent. We really don't know a lot of details out of that, but that's what it sounds like. It sounds like he was not able to consummate the marriage, and it was just a real shit show, to put it into modern terms. So some of you have joined. We've got somebody born in Bayshore. Nice to see you live tonight. Yeah, it's good to be live. There's just, human stories that I think they probably would prefer that they didn't make the press. In the 20th century, as that did. Let's see what date this is. This fairly old Colonial Williamsburg Journal. Yeah, that was autumn 2003. Picture of the governor's palace on the cover. Reconstructed governor's palace. The palace burned in like 1781 when it was being used as a hospital after the Battle of Yorktown, and fell into its own foundations, into its cellar. The cellar floor was intact, though, from the original palace, which was constructed, I think, 1720s, if I'm not mistaken. Governor Spotswood actually started it, and I don't think he finished it. I have to look up the details. I don't remember. But I helped to take up these flagstones. They've been laying there in the cellar since being set, and there were marks on the bottoms of them from the stonemasons who had laid them. And nobody's seen them before. But we documented those, and we conserved those things right down in the wine cellars areas. We had set up a fume hood in these sort of curved, arched vaults where, there was beds of straw for ice and to keep the wine cool. So early for refrigeration. But we built in fume hoods in there, and Steve Ray, of recent memory, and myself, we worked on those things during the time that I was going through the preliminaries of my divorce. I'd found out in January of 1994 that I might be getting divorced. And about late March, she decided that indeed she would divorce me, and came down from where she was working. I put her through school to get certification to teach art. And she came down and got half her stuff, and the healthy cat left me with the dying one. And I had to put that cat down. I couldn't have been much more pathetic at that time, really. But I was working with Steve down there. That was my job as a conservation tech with the objects conservator. And the objects we had to conserve were these flagstones. And we had a particular way of doing it, using a type of soluble acrylic kind of covering on the joints that we were going to epoxy together so you could dissolve the acrylic, the B72, I think it was in particular. And then the epoxy could be removed without really changing the stone any. So you want to do everything reversible, right? So you're basically uniting the stone with this epoxy on the surface that was soluble. Anyway, pretty obvious. Or maybe it's not. But they were big stones. There were a lot of heavy lifting. And yeah, I remember Albert Scutans made the fume hoods for it out of plexiglass and plywood, and they were pretty well contained, and we had a suction system to draw off the fumes that we would be exposed to. Otherwise, we were wearing respirators, to protect ourselves from the fumes as we worked. And then those were laid back in. The reason they were pulling them up was to put in a new HVAC system down there that would actually take care of the Wythe House and the Brush Everard House, and I think the Carter House as well, along Palace Green, which are major exhibition buildings. So a huge project. This was 1989, 1990, no, 1994 actually is when I was doing that work, come to think of it. I got married to Heather in 1990, and we were divorced in 1994. And it was final in August. By that time, I was back from Germany, and I was going off to Pittsburgh to start my part of what our plan had been, which is to go back to graduate school myself. But I went without a net, as it turned out. And I had a second childhood, basically. I got an opportunity. Yeah, I'm single again. I felt like Austin Powers, if you ever watch that. Oh, God. So life goes on. It's about 40 minutes into this live. And I don't know how much longer I want to keep on prattling on. I've been having fun with it. Lost Vibes 100 joined. Christopher Arnell. Assemblywoman Deborah Mazzarelli is joined. A lot of these people are pretty regular with me. I don't remember seeing Cindy Jorif before, but Lee Penman joined, and it's nice to see you too. Elise Brothers joined. Harriet C. joined. Beck MC joined, and somebody's, it's like little symbols and stuff there. Don't understand what that is. It says Nor at the end, and there's some sort of little symbol there. Anyway, that's one of the cool things about Substack. I have no idea who you people are. I do know that at least one was born in Bayshore, and the reason we're mentioning that is I am, part Bayshorean, and the fact my family had settled in that area of Long Island. My maternal grandmother's family, she was born there too, and she came down to Orange, Virginia. And then I started thinking about, Dad and growing up in Orange, Virginia, son of a Long Island lady and an Orange, Virginia guy. Charles Clinton Gill, my great-grandfather, my father's grandfather, ran the hardware store in Orange, Virginia on Main Street for many years. And that hardware store persisted until like the early 90s before it closed up. Billy Gill, my father's cousin, his first cousin, was the last proprietor there, I believe. Billy's daughter, Lena, is still around. And the family has some roots. We've got a set of the extended family has a couple little cabins that are up in the mountains of Amherst, Virginia. And that Amherst is where my great-great-great-great-grandfather settled after the Revolutionary War. He served at the Battle of Yorktown. He was Charles City County Militia. And, 4 greats back. And his son, Curtis, established a pretty good holding of land up there. And his sons did pretty well for themselves as well by the standards of the day. One of them went to Vanderbilt and became an eye doctor in Roanoke, and his son followed in his footsteps. And there's actually a Gill Foundation there for the blind. And Roanoke still, to this day, in the name of Elbridge Gill, Dr. Elbridge Gill. I think that's right. To go look up, fact check myself again. I don't know if anybody's still here. If you're still here, we could talk and chat a little bit. Tell me how you are, where you are. That's always interesting information. To know where people are coming from and where their lives have gone and what's on their mind. A lot of times we have people come in and just chatter away. Other times they just sit here and listen to me prattle on. But as I was mentioning earlier in this broadcast, my role model for this is Patti Smith. She will get on there and read Uncle Wiggily to us. So I just read you Harold B. Gill Jr., divorce research, and on it goes. Lee, you're still here. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was so much fun talking to you the other day. I just really enjoyed that. It was like old friends. And we'll have to do it again sometime. If you feel like going live now, we could. Oh, that's late. So I almost feel like saying, please don't take me up on that. But you're friends with Jesse and Jesse Paris Smith, who's Patti Smith's daughter. I guess you know Patti as well. Face-to-face somehow. Uncle Wiggily laughing out loud. Did you hear Patti today talking about finding an Uncle Wiggily t-shirt? And then when she was thinking about throwing her t-shirts out, first of the year, going to clean house a little bit. And she ends up not throwing out anything. It was good. I've got to listen to it again. but it's out there if you just go to at Patty Smith, of course. Yeah, I'm not reading Uncle Wiggily yet. Yeah, you do not want to see me live right now. Thank God. Thank God for that. You know what else I've got? I got something else. I got Science of the Mind here. I don't know if any of y'all like Science of the Mind. I have my like feelings of how creepy sometimes these kinds of things can be. But I like reading this one, and this one's got a really good introduction here. Am I on the right side? No, I'm on the wrong side. They're doing them in a double binding now. This is February on that side, and on this side is January. So January 1st, and this could be start to be a thing. I don't know. I always think I'm going to start a thing, but I am consistently inconsistent. I saw a good Calvin and Hobbes cartoon about New Year's resolutions, and Hobbes asked Calvin, "You got any?" He says, "Yeah, I think I'll just wing it, see what comes up." And they said, so you know, basically like so more of the same. And he says, "Yeah, I like to stick to my strengths." You heard it. Oh yeah, you heard Patty. Yeah, got it. That was very funny about the Uncle Wiggily T-shirt. She loves Uncle Wiggily. So this is the daily guide for January 2026, and it starts out with something I really needed to hear, an Emerson quotation. I don't know if you can read that or not, but I will read it to you. It says, "What I must do is all that concerns me, not what the people think." My wife says I'll never be a people pleaser, and I'm kind of proud of that. Brian Anderson is joined, by the way. Really glad of that. So this is on trust, January 1st, 2026. I think it's just one of the most important things I've read lately. And I've read a lot. And then there are a lot of important things. In fact, I'm working my way through Bread of Angels. I was going to try to read the whole thing before the end of last year, but I didn't. Somewhere in the early part, of where I am actually. So now I'm in this part where Patty is in I guess it's high school, 1959 anyway, maybe it's middle school. And they all have to pick a country and, gather information about it to learn about it in their course. And probably social studies, they called it now. And my generation is probably history then. And she picked Tibet. And all the other kids picked these European countries. And, the teacher wasn't even sure Tibet was a country. And at the time it was. Ali Lama, had his place in Lhasa. And nothing was happening in Tibet that was newsworthy. So it wasn't showing up in the newspapers. All the other kids were getting clippings about Denmark or Belgium or France or whatever. But she had picked this more obscure place because she had read about Shangri-La, right? And that, what was that novel? It's in there. Read Bread of Angels, you'll know what it is. I can't believe I can't remember that. Lost Horizon. Lost Horizon, that's it. Lost Horizons? Lost Horizon, I think. Anyway, so she picked Tibet and she started praying that something happened in Tibet that would be newsworthy so she'd be able to get some information too. And then, I think it was March 11th, some Tibetan guys attacked some Chinese, and the Chinese came into Tibet, and the Dalai Lama had to flee on foot, and all this happened. And she kind of felt that she had prayed that into happening. I think that is just priceless. Anyway, I'm not sure that she didn't. I mean, all things are connected, so could have been. And she was talking about the mists and the fogs that were surrounding the trail that the Dalai Lama had to go to get across the border into India, and how his monks were praying the fog to be there to cloak his passage. Oh boy, that was something else. And the Dalai Lama is still at it out there, folks. He may have retired officially, but he's still alive. On trust, what I must do is all that concerns me, not what people think. That's from Emerson's Essays, page 38. And then it says, from The Science of the Mind, page 496 by Ernest Holmes, we have the mind of Christ in such degree as we trust implicitly in the universe. And this is the essay that goes with it. One thing about trust, it can be freely given only once. If trust is broken for any reason, its return must be earned, and then such return will be fragile for quite a while. if not forever. Trust is precious, matchless, and soul touching. Without the capacity for trust, we would continually be tossed about by the winds of fate. It is the bond that is formed between people, institutions, and governments that depend on one another to be who they say they are and do what they say they will do. Looking at trust from this perspective, we can see that it is a truly sacred quality, godlike in many ways, the foundation for all that holds honor, truthfulness, stability, love, and peace. We all know this. We know trust as a link between ourselves and the rest of the world. If we look within ourselves, we can ask, can I be trusted? Is my word my bond? Is my face before the world the same from day to day, or is my smile shadowed to deceive? Can I be counted on to deliver? As spiritual beings living in the world today, we should ask these questions of ourselves with regularity so that our inner visions do not become cloudy. The world needs us. It needs our divinely guided lives to bring light into atmospheres. Let us freely know that we can be trusted. And the affirmation is, the divine good fulfills me, always has, always will, and I access it every day. I trust myself as a spiritual being to answer to guidance, and I know what is mine to do. And that's it. And we have Julia Henry has joined. Good to have you. Good to have all of you. Good to be on the planet still. At 62, there's no guarantee that I'll have another day. I've got 63 coming up February 4th and 3:21 in the morning on Eastern Time. I was born in Williamsburg, Virginia. I just did my astrology chart recently. Actually, I think I have it here a little bit. And, it was fun to do. It was fun to graph it out. I used Richard Tarnas's Cosmos and Psyche. I don't know if you all know about Richard Tarnas. He wrote The Passion of the Western Mind, and then he came out with Cosmos and Psyche. I'm sure he's done other things since. I've seen him lecture at the Jung Institute. And I'm telling you, I'm not really much of an astrology follower. I know I'm an Aquarius, Sagittarius rising, but I didn't really know my whole star chart, where the planets were in what house and all that. And I don't even know what that means. But I guess I could find out if I was really curious, and it might be fun. Anyway, somewhere in here, a hobbit, I had it. It's gone. So I'm not going to do it right now. But anyway, we have a year of Fire Horse, I think, coming up in the Chinese astrology. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. This world has really gone kind of crazy, it feels like, but it always feels that way. It always feels like we're tipping over the edge. Vietnam was just crazy, right? I was a kid then. And then the Gulf War I. I don't know. I think we felt kind of righteous then. We felt kind of like this is the right thing to do. The Kuwaitis have been invaded. It's not good. We need to push the Iraqis back out. They're not going to leave without us using force, and we can put it together, and it's a righteous war. I don't know. I don't want to go and inventory that again. So many acts of violence and force that I think are questionable. We need to question it. We need to ask ourselves, is there any justification for visiting physical violence on others? My feeling is no, there's not. And we should extend unconditional love and acceptance to each other, but we do have to negotiate and be fair-minded. So when somebody wants to exert force on another person or, use their power to exert their will, it's tricky business. It's got to be negotiated. We tend to, in our culture, it seems to me, we've been inculcated in such a way that by and large, many of us anyway, roll over for it. As long as we're taken care of in a way we can accept, we'll let things slide. We'll let somebody be treated with injustice. And I think we should stop and think about that more. We should really consider our actions. I can only be the change I want to see in the world. I cannot get you to do anything different than what you're going to do. And I've got to accept you just the way you are if I want to be peaceful inside. I can wish for better. I can try to model a behavior and hope people will pick up what I'm laying down. If they do, great. If what I'm doing is actually constructive and helpful, if it's a waste of your time, that's another matter. And thanks for the heart. Um, I don't know. I spend a lot of my time perplexed. To tell you the truth, I've been watching myself and my actions and doing an inventory, going back, looking at how I have conducted myself. And I'm taken back to G.K. Chesterton's little comment that he made to a newspaper that asked, "Dear Sir, what is wrong with the world today?" He said, "Dear Sirs," back to the newspaper editorial board, "I am. I'm what's wrong with the world today." And I mean, look at my eyes. They're blue, right? And look at the skin tone. When I was dating this Italian girl from Sardinia, in University of Pittsburgh, we were teaching assistants and we got together. And she was asked by one of her friends, "What color is your boyfriend?" It's like, "What race?" Right? And she, being very disingenuous, no, she's kind of like ingenue or whatever, said, "Oh, he is pink." I'm a pink boy. And the Church of the Subgenius does not cotton to pink boys. If you don't know about the Church of the Subgenius, hail Bob. Bob Dobbs is our JR. Bob Dobbs is our real, the prophet of the subgenius. It was a thing put together as kind of a parody religion by some stoners in Texas, I believe, is the deal. The Reverend Ivan Stang being one among them. And the deal was they were getting stoned and they thought, our problem is we're not real geniuses. We're like subgeniuses. And they spun a whole church out of it. And they have X day and when everything's supposed to, end. And they keep having it because things don't end. And it must have been another X day or something. There's a lot of just general tomfoolery about it. There's a documentary out there you can find, but it was in the 70s and up in the guardhouse in Colonial Williamsburg, there was, a break room up there from the magazine staff, the State Garrison Regiment, they were guarding the magazine. 1778 is what we were representing at the time. And, somebody had a zine up there of the subgenius. That was just really entertaining. I have a copy somewhere here of the Book of the Subgenius. I got it when I recently re-upped my membership. You will pay to know what you think is one of their mottos. There's so many little things that are really kind of amusing and lift the heart. It's kind of like Mad Magazine, right? That was designed to sort of lift our hearts up as we were watching the absurdity, the madness of just day-to-day life. We can do better than this. We can forge one conversation at a time, connection with one another. And I'm not going to go over an hour. I'm going to cut myself off in about 1.5 minutes. But we can change the world. The old tune by Chicago, I was pushing that out earlier today. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. It's like here, something about they tied your brother to a chair. Won't you please come to Chicago just to sing? Then the refrain is, we can change the world, rearrange the world. Real good anthem. Never more pertinent than now. People have the power. If you get a chance, read my Happy New Year post. Please. And please, if you can, be a paid subscriber. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot for an individual to support another individual here. It's a way we can actually move the needle a little bit. Every penny we spend, though, is a vote for the kind of world we are co-creating. Don't forget that, folks. We're making choices of exactly how the world is showing up. And if you don't like the world you're seeing, look at your part in it because you played a part in it. You can't live a single day without making an impact on things. I love to see the hearts. That gives me some encouragement, but definitely think about what you're doing and pass it on. If you can't support me, find somebody you do like and support them. This is an economic engine where you have an opportunity to really transform the world. It's kind of like Uber or Airbnb, those kind of platforms, they actually enriched a lot of people. And maybe the equity isn't there, but here the equity kind of is. And it depends on whether we're putting out something of value or not. I'm hoping I'm going to put out more of value. I've hired a coach. I've gotten some feedback. I've got some people who have designs on things. I've been interviewing people. I haven't interviewed the people on this one yet, but maybe I will. I've been encouraged by Alexei Zaitsev to interview Anthony Peake. Apparently he has. I did interview this guy, the Philip Chalmers, Tall Tales of a Short Childhood. He's got another book over here, My Bipolar Reality. And there's another screenplay. It's down deep. But there's so many people I'd like to interview. I don't know the condition of Stanislav Grof. He's really old now. But The Way of the Psychonaut, this is volume 1. I've also got volume 2 over here, Way of the Psychonaut. Really interesting stuff he's done on holotropic breath work. So lots of healing possible. Yeah, Laszlo, exactly. That was the Immortal Mind book I had in my hand a second ago. I've also got the Akashic Field and all this stuff. Science of Akasha, something like that. I can't remember all his titles, but I've got a ton of them. And I've read a lot of them. And I read around in them. Maybe we'll read some of them with you guys later. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Spirit of Music, highly recommended. Victor Wooten's The Spirit of Music. And if you don't know Wavy Gravy yet, please find out about him. He's like my guru. Nobody's Fool is what he's called. And wrapping it up, I'm over an hour. The Everything and the Nothing by Mayor Baba. I might put a clip up to this later. Let's see action. Nothing is Everything. Pete Townsend from Who Came First, his first solo album. Let's See Action. The Who also covered it, but it was originally on his solo album. So I'm going to try to avoid getting the flu that my wife seems to have, and I hope that you all keep yourself safe. And yes, it is a Hungarian name because he is Hungarian. He is the, if you don't know who he is, Harriet, he is the founder of the Budapest School. And can I find it quick enough to read? I put it down somewhere. Digging. Oops. Sliding. No, not over there. Not over there. I think it's over here. Tall Tale, Immortal Mind. Yeah, Immortal Mind. There it is. Let's read you a little bit. Back at least. Things slid. Do not need any avalanches. Okay. So Irvin Laszlo is how I pronounce it. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. What's his first name? Irvin, Ervin. He is a systems scientist, integral theorist, and classical pianist. Twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, he is the founder and president of the international think tank, the Club of Budapest, I think, as well as the Irvin Laszlo Center for Advanced Study. He lives in Tuscany. Anthony Peake, who wrote it with him, here it is, Irvin Laszlo, with Anthony Peake, The Immortal Mind, Science and the Continuity of Consciousness Beyond the Brain. Okay, what else to say about it? Peake is a writer, researcher, and author of 7 books, including Making Sense of Near-Death Experiences, which received a highly commended award from the British Medical Association. He lives in Crawley, West Sussex, UK. Now, what I'd like to say about this, and there's a quote from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS for short, and the CEO of SEVA Foundation, James O'Dea, former president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And it's funny that the Seva Foundation is mentioned there on the back of the book because I'm wearing my Seva t-shirt at the moment. You can't see it very well there, but it's sort of a Sanskrit word, Seva, which means service. Sorry, I can't really pull it up high enough to read it. But this, you'll see various people wearing this, including Ram Dass. You'll see Bob Weir wearing it. You'll see quite a number of people who are out there in the public eye wearing Seva for service to humanity. Because what Seva did, and I'm going to go ahead and extend my comments here because this is really important that people know about this. Steve Jobs got together people like Larry Brilliant, MD, and UN doctors as well that worked with Larry. Larry was a UN doctor. Dr. America, as his guru used to call him. The name of Neem Karoli Baba was the guru who called him Dr. America and sent him off, kept sending him away from his ashram in India to go to the UN and get on board with eradicating smallpox. So Steve Jobs of Apple, after the eradication of smallpox, got these guys together, the UN doctors and the diplomats and everybody who was involved in that, and got Ram Dass and got his, name meant servant of God, given to him by Neem Karoli Baba. And it got Wavy Gravy as well, who's Larry's best friend, by the way. When your best friend's a clown, is the way he puts it. And you can find out more about that in the Wavy Gravy movie, Saint Misbehaving, or in Sometimes Brilliant, the memoir of Larry Brilliant. Getting to the point, Steve Jobs gets these guys together out in Michigan or Minnesota or something and says, let's tackle something, figure out what we're going to tackle next. We've eradicated smallpox. What else can we do? We can change the world, right? So they had gone out in 70 from London, the hog farm, Wavy Gravy's outfit with Larry Brilliant in tow, as before the Neem Karoli Baba's thing. And Wavy and company, the hog farm, his commune, get some buses, do some benefit stuff in London, get enough money for the buses to go across Europe, across the Hindu Kush, to go into Bangladesh to feed the starving people of Bangladesh from all the terrible things that were happening in 1970 that led to the concert of Bangladesh, or concert for Bangladesh, I should say. George Harrison and Ravi Shankar were about that. And Bob Dylan was on that show. It's a great, great thing. Great music. And, basically Wavy's idea was if we go over there and feed those poor people in Bangladesh, then governments will see us doing that and saying, there's hippies doing it. We got to do it better. I just love that. Such an insane logic, but it also worked. And they got out there in the Hindu Kush and they're up in Nepal. They go up into Nepal anyway, because they can't go into East Pakistan, as it was called then, Bangladesh, because war had broken out. So they're stopped from actually being able to fulfill the mission they were on. But they go up in there and they find a lot of people and they realize, if we can ever do anything for these people, if we ever get ourselves in a position where we can do something for them, we'll have to remember this. We'll have to do that because there are so many people in abject poverty, people who are blind needlessly. So that's it. That's what Seva does now. Its primary focus is on restoring sight to the unnecessarily blind. You can give them $50 and they can save the sight of like 2 people for that. They also do a lot of other work, and the third world in particular on eyesight, because can you imagine being blind? You just become, a mouth that doesn't do anything, that just eats, a useless eater, I think they call them, or something like that. It's horrible. And they don't have to be blind. Their sight can be restored, with a cataract operation or whatever. So, that's been going on, and 5 million people have had their sight restored since Seva started in 79. And the funny story about this, because I've gone over my hour, but I will just keep prattling on about this for a while because I think it's so important. They got together, they figured out what they wanted to do, and they said, well, we need to raise funds for this. And Wavy's connection to the Grateful Dead was there, and he was supposed to get them on board. And as he says, in the land of kitchen synchronicity, he boarded a plane to fly out of there back to California. Who was on it but the Grateful Dead? And they didn't have parachutes. So he approached the drummers first, and they were pushovers for it. Jerry Garcia back here, he went for it. And they were playing a benefit concert in '79 for it. And there's some pretty good shots of that out there that Jay Blakesberg did. Jay is a really good photographer. This is his Retro Blakesberg, a volume that was done by his daughter. But let's get back to the concert in '79. They're doing that, and Bill, I think Wavy said he was sitting with somebody Steve Parrish, who was the guitar tech for Jerry. So he was sitting getting delightfully altered, as he put it, with Steve Parrish, and Bill comes up with an envelope, and he opens it up, and it's a check for $10,000 from Bill Graham. And he said, Bill, why are you doing this? And he said, because you did not hit on me, my friend. And he was kind of miffed because he was like, it's a benefit concert. Why am I the last one to find out about this? Anyway, that was Wavy tells that story so beautifully in a panel that I was part of from a distance. I was part of the audience, in other words, back in 2019, I think, well, 2018, I think it was, with a whole bunch of other guys. Cameron Sears, there was Steve Kimmick, there was Matt Butler, Wavy Gravy, Scott Shapiro, and Chris Perella in that panel, and I'll go to that later. So Retro Blakesberg, yeah, this book of Jay Blakesberg's photography. I had him as a guest once. I'll probably have him back again on Harrowing's podcast. He's a really great guy. This one is autographed by quite a few people. Wayne Coyne, Michael Franti, Ricky Blakesberg, Jay's daughter, and James. And this is all like his film stuff. It's a volume 1 from his film archive. And Jay's written up here, Hal, the music never stopped. He's such a prince of a human being. The guy's amazingly hardworking, but he started out photographing his friends and stuff. Actually, there's a good one of Wavy getting his clown makeup on. What does that say? He actually dates all these things too, so you know when it is. That was 1987. The other one is the Warfield Theater in 1980. By that time, Jay was pretty regular fan photographer, and he was also getting his work published. But yeah, just some pretty amazing things. This is from the Flaming Lips, May 2nd, 2004, at Coachella in Indio, California. Guy in a bubble on top of the crowd. It's pretty amazing. And I could just go on, and I probably will go on. Let's see, father and daughter. There's a section here about Ricky and her preface to the book itself. Old pictures of Jay, artist, historian, empath, observer, magician, by Michael Franti. That's a pretty good quote about him. I read that at the beginning of my interview with Jay. It said, his hard work, the eye of an artist, the heart and soul of an empath, the longevity of a historian, the wisdom of the ages, the kindness of an old friend. And on December 1st, Jay turned 64. We still love him. It was part of our conversation as well. He beat me to it. I tell you, the guy is quick. This is his first published photograph of Jorma Kaukonen, who was the lead guitarist of the Jefferson Airplane, but this is post-Airplane, and you can see that gold tooth. And they caught him at a diner after a show. They followed him there. Smile of the month, it says. May 20th, me and a few friends saw Jorma at the Capitol Theater in New Jersey. After the show, we followed Jorma's limo to the New York City and finally stopped at a deli on 54th and 7th Avenue. So you can actually go to the site where that happened. They And when they stopped, we all went into the deli to talk to Yorm and get his autograph. Two of my friends got $10 bills signed, which they ended up spending the next day. While we were hanging out, waiting to smoke a joint with Yorma, I focused in on his head and said, "Hey, Yorma, how about a smile?" And this is what I got. And Jay Blakesburg, Clark, New Jersey. So that was what he was doing back then. And, this is the kind of life I was leading about then, and they were leading. The idea of smoking pot and getting beer and trying to chase girls, but being too lame to get any. And so, being so enamored with Budweiser that you have it on your sheets. That's par for the course. I tell you, the Budweiser was really attractive to me when I got a hold of it. And I was just a year behind Jay chronologically. He never ran into him, but he had a camera and he kept using it and using it and using it. There's a better rendition of the Yorma photograph there for you. And then there's this one of Cipollina, I think. John Cipollina. And May 17th, 1970 something. 79. The Yorma shot is from May 18th, 1978. And he sent it in a second. And one of the things that happened to him that really sort of made it work was he went to the No Nukes rally in Washington, D.C., right here in front of the Capitol, and he ran into Brent Midland there with the long hair and beard and Bob Weir. And one thing led to another. He found a press pass on the ground. He ends up talking about that. That's the No Nukes rally, May 6, 1979. And he's able to get up on stage, even though he's not really press. And he gets that shot of Joni Mitchell, Jackson Brown, I think. Jackson, yeah. And I don't know, man. We might have some of these people on here eventually, if I can make the right connections. We had Keith Gard on earlier this last week. He managed Aerosmith, and he manages Michelle Ezrick now, who is the director of Wavy Gravy's movie, and who is fortunately a friend. So I'm really grateful for them. We were going back and forth a little bit about the interview with Keith Gard, and I said some things that weren't quite right, so it got corrected, and then it ended up being something where she ended up putting it out there on New Year's Eve. Keith and I talked on the 30th, and it was just a lot of fun, So Angel Woods, big book, great read, yes, and limited, very limited. This one is 42 of 220 in existence, putting it back in its box, tucking it away. I also have one that he did very recently. I haven't really looked at it yet. Yeah. No, come on, don't fall over. Come on now. Stay up. There we go. It's called Rainbow Full of Sound. Again, a box. Pull the book out. Barely looked at this. Oh, rats. Well, that's not real good. Just knocked over some water. Twill happen. I don't think there's anything that's, just let it evaporate. But that's Rainbow Full of Sound. And you can see who it is. It's a Dead End Company. John Mayer in the middle there with these old geezers. Look at my finger on. Oh, that's O'Teal. He's not so old. But next to him, Bill Kreutzmann, drummer. And Bob Weir's over here, Mickey Hart, Jeff Chiamente. And I didn't even realize that he had actually stuck a print here of that in with it. Numbered print, yeah. Nah, just dated and signed, but still very nice. A stamp of authenticity on the back. So what else got on? Oops, help is on the way. Paper towels, well, I don't know. It's okay. It's not getting all my books. That's the important thing. But isn't that nice? Got the signature page there. Mickey Hart signed it, and Jay. And it says, Hal, inspiration moved me brightly. 19 of 185. The other one was one of 220. This one is number 19 of 185. And just really lucky to have been able to support Jay and do this kind of work. Um, gorgeous pictures. I wasn't really into Dead and Company as much as some of the others. I mean, they were good. John Mayer's a good player. O'Teal's an amazing player as well. He's not Phil Lesh, but he's got his own thing going on, and that's cool. And Jeff Chiamente's been keyboard player, though, pretty much for everything that's been going on. Rat Dog, further, on and on. The good pictures of Bill Walton here. I'm not showing them to you because I'm just sort of browsing through it myself. Well, so yeah, frame it. Yeah, well, I could frame it. I got a lot of things to frame, actually. So many. But you know how much it costs to frame anything these days? I gotta learn how to do it myself is what I need to do. Buy the frames and frame them myself. But I do have a lot back here. You see that one back there? It's not framed. It's just all propped up. That's Phil Lesh with his graffiti that told him to start Terrapin Crossroads. It's a steal your face the graffiti thing, kind of crudely done with the motto, "Buckle up, kids," which is kind of a good idea when you're going into the kind of energy that's generated by these guys when they're on stage, because the whole audience picks up that energy, reflects it back to the band, and goes back and forth and becomes a one big entity. Keith Gard and I were talking about that in the tail end of our conversation together. And I was telling him about talking to David Gantz about the time that he was over at Jerry's house, and Joseph Campbell was one of the people who was there as well. Do I have any Campbell handy? I don't think I do. Might have, but not seeing it. But yeah, Phil had brought his copy, knowing that Joseph Campbell was going to be there. That's Phil, brought his copy of The Skeleton Key to Finnegan's Wake for Joseph Campbell to autograph for him. And that's got to have some value. I expect Graham probably has that. Graham Lesh is Phil's son, one of the two. And that's a lot of good story right there as well. The whole idea of, Phil being alive as long as he died at 84 in 2024. So I felt a kind of a kinship with Graham and his other son, Brian, in that I'd lost my father the same year. But Phil was a little younger. He was 84, but he was on his second liver, and he had nearly died in front of his sons when his liver went, and he had hepatitis C. When people have that can cause complete liver shutdown eventually. And that happened to him. He needed a new one. He did get one from a guy named Cody who had been killed in a bike accident or something, I think. I'm not sure exactly how. And young Cody had turned to somebody he loved and said, if anything ever happens to me, I want to be an organ donor. And because of that gift saved several people's lives. I think Phil said 8 people's lives were saved by Cody's sacrifice, or his gift is more like it, of his organs. And Phil got his liver, and Phil carried Cody around with him under his diaphragm. And he wore a kind of wrist sweatband that said Cody on it. And he would make his audience commit to becoming organ donors, which to my mind is just really a tremendous thing. I don't know how many did. I am an organ donor, not just because of that, but I was actually willing to be a living organ donor for a cousin who needed a new liver, who after his father had died had gone into alcoholism pretty badly, and I don't know what all, but anyway, ruined his liver and needed to have a new one. And I got screened out. I was 59. And there were some things in my blood that basically caused them to say, no, it's not worth the risk. And my cousin did get a liver, and he's alive. And I hope well today. I have not really seen him much since, because when I was screened out, my family decided, well, I don't know. Apparently, I was only of value for my liver. That's the way it feels. I think there's some weirdness around that. I was going to have to be supported during the time that I would be convalescing. I couldn't just do it without support because I have a wife who was disabled and her mother was then pretty aged and would in fact die in March of that year. I was being screened in the fall of 21, I guess it was. And in 22, she died. And if I had been, if I had gone through with it, I probably would have been at the moment, but I wouldn't be able to drive my wife up to be at her mother's bedside before she died. We were able to make it, but it wasn't long. And very tragic. I mean, to watch people pass like that. But in 91 years old is a pretty good run. I hope to be able to make it to 93 because I'm 62 now, and I think of my half my life, and then another half, another third. I think in terms of 31 right now, 31, 62, 93. That's what I'm aiming for. And I'm babbling, so I'm going to cut it where it's 125, 23 anyway. And I don't see a lot of traffic. Wonderful. Kind of organ donating is unusual. Good friend. When did you start collecting your books? When did I start collecting my books? When haven't I collected my books? I've actually jettisoned books. I've given away everything and then rebuilt it. It's kind of like Thomas Jefferson did the same thing. So I think I'm in good company. So I hope that was helpful and interesting. And yeah, you're right about the framing. I should do it. I don't know if you all can see this over here. I know that there's this part's on the mobile, but over yonder, over that way, there's Jerry. And that's another Jay Blakesberg print that he sent me as part of, extras with the books. I guess because he knows me a little bit. I had him do this great thing. If you go to archive.org, you can find it. Just go KSKQ Jay Blakesberg Morning Show or something like that. And there's a 2-parter interview that he did with Holly Lorian Adams, who's a friend of mine out there, through David Gantz, through a lot of different circumstances. It's a good story. And I got her to interview Jay. She didn't know who Jay was. And it's just really amusing because he's huge and in the field of visual anthropology. That's what he calls it. Good night, y'all. Thanks for hanging with me for a while. Oh, it's 12:05 a.m. Welcome to January 2nd, 2026. Where did I put my Science of the Mind? I got to read the next entry. It's going to be around here somewhere. I have reshuffled everything all over again. So I do that. I'm going to say goodnight again. Nighty-night. Yeah, you too. Don't stay up too late. Watch your health. Be the change you want to see in the world, and remember, every cent spent is a vote for the kind of world we are co-creating. Bonsoir.